International Media TV. Television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
Marcus Books, the oldest Black independent bookstore in the country, hosted a book signing for Tavis Smiley. His newest book is titled Fail Up.
We got Atlanta, Houston, Chicago left on the tour. So we're about halfway through what's been a wonderful tour. As you know, this is the you may know this is the 15th book I've done, and it's thank you. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. I only raise that because I have been at Marcus Books, I think, for just about every one of those books. I was just in Winston-Salem, North Carolina the other day, and Winston-Salem was not on my tour itinerary, but I added it because there's a independent Black-owned store there called Special Occasions. You know it. Been there many times over the years, and Special Occasions is going out of business. And I went there to celebrate with them and to do a book signing as the last official event at that store. It broke my heart because over these 20 years that I've been in the broadcast business and over these 15 books, I've always made it my business to make sure that I always sign at these independent Black-owned stores. I don't ever run away. Yeah, I never, I do the Barnes & Noble thing, and back in the day when there were other stores, Borders, etc., I would do them as well. But I never, ever have shied away from doing these stores, and I've never, ever come to the Bay Area and not done a signing here. And so I went to Special Occasions to really celebrate with them the 27, 28 years they'd been in business, but it was heartbreaking to see these stores go under. And so I just want to start, as I always do, whenever I'm honored to come into this facility. For years over in San Francisco, and now here, of course, always in Oakland. But this family and this store and this community has a special place in my heart. And as long as Marcus is here, I'm going to be here supporting Marcus Books. So I'm delighted. Yeah. So to Dr. Richardson and Blanche and the family, I'm just delighted always to come back in here for some conversation with you. In one of my favorite cities in the world, Oakland, California. So I appreciate it. Yeah. But I mentioned earlier, this is the 15th book that I've written, the one that's required me to be the most transparent, the most open, the most authentic. My sense is that if you're going to write a book and lay your soul bare, you might as well be honest about it. And the timing of this book couldn't be more propitious, I think, given the subject matter. I wrote the book basically because 2011 is my 20th anniversary in the broadcast business. And I should start again. Thank you. Y'all are way too kind tonight. See, this is why I love Oakland right here. Every time I say something, y'all applaud. I just love it, I tell you. Hello. Whoa. Yeah. nice day outside in Oakland. Yeah. Stop. Yeah. That's why I love this town, man. But this year, 2011, is my 20th year in the broadcast business, and as I started to reflect on what this 20-year journey has been, it occurred to me, looking back on the 20 years that I've been doing this, that I've had more failures, I've made more mistakes, I've had more missteps, more miscalculations than I really wanted to admit. A lot of failings, a lot of mistakes along the way. Number one, I realized that looking back on this journey. My entire staff was gathered, and we're talking about how we're going to celebrate this 20th anniversary and all the things we're going to do this year. And in my own quiet space, in my own solitude, I started wrestling with and looking back over this 2-decade journey, trying to figure out rather what it had actually meant. What has this 2-decade journey been about in the broadcast business? And I realized, as I said a moment ago, number one, that I had a lot more failings, a lot more mistakes, missteps, miscues, miscalculations than I really cared to admit, number one. Number two, I realized, looking around all my friends and all the folk who I've interviewed over these years on radio and television, that I wasn't the only one. That everybody I've talked to, essentially, over 20 years has failed their way up as well. And the whole point of talking to them in these conversations on radio and television for all these years is to get to know them, to get inside their head space, inside their heart space, to understand better their journey, to revel in their humanity. And the more I started to think about it, the more I realized that I am not the only one who I know who has failed up. Everybody, as we say in my neighborhood, everybody I know over these years that have met, they have failed their way up as well. And then I did something interesting. I started to look back on my 20-year journey and lay out on paper where the book, this is the genesis of the book. I started to lay out on paper all the mistakes, all the failings I had had. And I saw something interesting. Every major failing I had had, I could draw a linear line, a direct line from that failing to one of my greatest successes. Every time I laid this out, when I got fired by BET and everybody in Oakland was mad at BET for firing Tavis, and all across the country, black folk were all up in arms about BET firing Tavis. It was that firing that led directly to my being on ABC and CNN and NPR and PBS, all the stuff y'all see me on now. That firing led directly to that. I was on NPR at one point, as you know. When I left NPR after 3 years, I left NPR because I was disturbed. I didn't like this feeling I was getting of being the spook who sat by the door. NPR had not been good enough about diversity and inclusion. I love them as a network. They're the best at delivering news. I'm an NPR supporter. I'm on public radio every day. But I didn't like the idea of being the first Negro in the door. All of our taxpayer dollars go to support public radio. But for some reason, I'm the first Negro in the building on the air in 2002. First black person to have his own show on NPR nationally in 2002. Something wrong with that it takes that long. I'm the first black person in the history of PBS. PBS, your tax dollars go to support PBS. I'm the first black person in the history of PBS to have his own nightly show 5 nights a week on PBS. That's crazy. That was in 2004. That's just a few years ago, y'all. So as I started to look back on these things, specifically when I left NPR and said publicly that I don't want to be the spook who sat by the door. I don't like this feeling of being used, that whenever NPR wants to brag about diversity and inclusion, they put my face out. But there are no producers of color. There are no persons in the hierarchy of NPR, leadership of color. There are no folk of color on the board of NPR. And I didn't like this feeling after being there for 3 years of being the guy they wanted to use as their poster child for diversity and inclusion. And my thing is, if you can't bring my folk along with me, then I will step away from NPR, try to raise this issue, and see what will happen. Thankfully, all these years later, they've let some black folk in the building. Michelle Norris, great journalist on All Things Considered every day. Michelle Martin, host of Tell Me More. Michael Eric Dyson's on public radio now. They let, for a minute, Ed Gordon came behind me, and Farad Chadea came behind me. Tony Cox came behind me. So there are a number of African Americans and others who've been allowed to come in the building now because, as the old saying goes, he or she who breaks through the brush first gets the thorns. And I'm okay with that. When I left NPR, I had no idea it was going to lead to me owning my own radio show. And Public Radio International, I'm still on public radio, but instead of working for NPR, I own it now. And PRI distributes it. So I own my show on public radio. I own Smiley and West on public radio with my dear friend Dr. Cornell West, and they distribute it. I own my show on PBS. After being fired by BET, working for them, I own it. PBS distributes it. The point I'm trying to make is that every time I had a major failing, I could draw a direct line to the success that came as a result of that particular failure. So I'm looking back now 20 years later, I see all the mistakes I've made, number one. I realize, number two, I'm not the only one. I realize, number three, that all of these failures led directly to the successes that family and friends around the country celebrate. And then it occurred to me that the real problem in this country where failure is concerned is that when people become successful, whatever that means, when you make it to the top, whatever that means, the game is, especially in LA where I live, especially in LA, once you get to the top, the game is to act like you've always been fabulous. that you ain't never made no mistakes, that you ain't never messed up, that you ain't never been fired, that you never had plastic surgery, that you never had that gap in your mouth closed, that you've never made mistakes, that you've never messed up, you've never failed. The game is to act like you've always been fabulous. Well, here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that people can't get helped. You can't inspire people. You can't uplift people. You can't empower or encourage, or you can't do any of that if you're going to try to lie about your own story. And so I wrestled with the fact whether or not I really wanted to lay my own soul bare about the mistakes I've made. And I thought ultimately I would do something that's a bit unorthodox. Rather than acting like I've always been fabulous And I've always had Armani suits and nice shoes and a nice place to live. Rather than acting like that, let me just lay out the mistakes I've made. Tell the truth. Tell the truth and hope that in the process, people can situate themselves in the story. My journey is my journey. Your journey is your journey. The one thing I know we all have in common is that every one of us, if we ever going to be successful, or if we are successful, we have failed our way up. We've all failed up. There's nobody who's being honest with you. Nobody who's being honest, who's achieved any level of success in any field of human endeavor. If they're being honest, they will tell you that they've learned more from their failings than they've learned from their successes. If I could replace the word failure with a single word, you know what it would be? Preparation. That's all that failure is, preparation. Preparing you for the next opportunity. Babe Ruth put it this way: every strike gets me closer to the next home run. Every strike gets me closer to the next home run. I love Samuel Beckett. In this book, on the very first page, you'll see these words from Samuel Beckett. Ever tried? Ever failed? No matter. Try again. Fail again. Fail better. I love that. Try again. Fail again. Fail better. Try again. Fail again. Fail better. I came across that quote many years ago, courtesy of my dear and abiding friend, the smartest Negro I know, Cornel West. Dr. West. Dr. West and I were talking one day. We were talking one day at a difficult time a few years ago when I turned 40. And we came back to this conversation, but he reminded me of a conversation years ago that we had about this notion of failing. And what Dr. West said to me one day in a conversation about we were having, I was feeling out of sorts with all that I was doing. I felt like I was spinning my wheels. Sometimes even when you're doing everything you can to love and serve black people, and that's my definition of leadership, you can't lead folk unless you love folk. And you can't save folk unless you serve folk. You can't lead if you don't love. You can't save if you don't serve. I don't care who you are. The only thing that matters about leadership are two things. One, what is the depth of your love for the people? And what is the quality of your service to them? Leadership is only about loving and serving, not your title, not how much money you make, not where you live, how many degrees you have. Leadership is about loving and serving people. That's what it's about. And I felt like I was doing everything I could, but I still felt like I was spinning my wheels. It's like running through the streets of Oakland or going to the gym and being on the treadmill. You can get a decent workout on the treadmill, but you ain't going nowhere. And I felt like I was doing everything I could, but I felt like I was running in place and I wasn't getting anything done. I looked at all that my community was grappling with, and I just felt like I wasn't making as significant a contribution as I could have been, even though I was doing a whole lot more than most Negroes I know on TV and radio every day and traveling the country. I still felt like I wasn't getting enough done. And Dr. West said to me very quickly in a conversation, Brother Tavis, let me put it to you this way. This is stuff that only West in his brilliance could lay out, this great philosopher. Dr. West said to me, Tavis, whether you die at 39 like your hero, Martin King, I regard Dr. King, regard him personally as the greatest American we've ever produced. He said to me, whether you die at 39 like Dr. King, or whether you live to be 139, check this, you ain't gonna get it all done. He said to me that every one of us dies a failure. That hit me. I'm going to Dr. West for some advice about how to navigate forward, and he's telling me I'm going to die a failure. I had to wrestle with that for just a second. Every one of us dies a failure. His point simply was that if you live to be 139, you're not going to write every book. You're not going to deliver every speech. You're not going to get every sale. You're not going to help and serve every customer. You're not going to get through to every student that you teach. You're not going to travel to all the cities around the world that you want to go to. You're not going to meet everybody you want to meet. Whatever your field of human endeavor is in that specific space, you are not going to get it all done. When you die, there's going to be stuff you never got to, no matter how long you live. So his point philosophically is that every one of us dies a failure. And then he hit me with this. Since we all going to die failures, what matters most, Doc said to me, is how good is your failure. If you're going to die a failure, that's the question we got to wrestle with. I got it. Thank you. If we're going to die a failure, the question is, how good is your failure? And then years ago, he hit me with this Beckett quote. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. try again, fail again, fail better. Every day you wake up, you get another chance to get it right. Every day you wake up, you get another chance to fail better. I pray the same prayer every morning that I wake up. If you atheist or agnostic, I ain't mad at you. God bless you. Every morning I wake up, I pray the same prayer. And it goes simply like this. Father, when the evening, I prayed it this morning when I woke up here in the Bay Area. Father, when the evening comes and the night falls, and we're getting close to that. When the evening comes and the night falls, let me be able to look back on this day and see something that I have done that I can present to you that might not make me feel so ashamed. When the evening comes and the night falls, let me look back on this day and find something that I've done, something small, something large, something that I've done that I can present to you that might not make me feel so ashamed. Now, for those Christians in the room, I ain't mad at nobody else. If you ain't, you understand the importance of that phrase, so ashamed. We always are brought low in his presence. We ought to bow down, but I used to want to feel so ashamed. But I want to have something to present to you. And so that every day you wake up, you get another chance to get it right. Every day you wake up, you get a chance to fail better. So what this book essentially does is lay out, on the occasion of my 20 years in the business, the 20 biggest mistakes, the 20 worst failings I've ever had. We lay our soul bare in this book. And I talk about how I've learned lessons about how to succeed only because I have failed my way up. There are some stories in this book that I was so embarrassed by, so humiliated by, for years I never told my parents. I had to literally call my mama and daddy before the books arrived at their home to tell them they were about to read some stuff about their number one son, their firstborn child, that they didn't know. I did not want my parents going into full cardiac arrest when they read stuff about me that they didn't even know. My parents did not know. So I know you didn't know, because my mama and them didn't know, that when I was in college, I went to jail. Got arrested for writing bad checks. Got put on probation. Almost got kicked out of school because so many college students, when they get to the campus, these credit card companies throw credit cards at you. Y'all know what I'm talking about. They throw bank accounts at you and all this financial trickery. And I didn't have no money, didn't know nothing about it. I'm one of 13 people in a family. In a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 3-bedroom trailer. We live in a trailer park, 3 bedrooms. My 7 younger brothers and me in one room, my mom and daddy in another room, Big Mama and my 2 sisters in the 3rd bedroom. 13 people in a 1-bathroom, 3-bedroom trailer. That's how I was raised. You know I didn't know nothing about no money. And I get to campus and white folk throwing credit cards at me and bank accounts. I was taking it all in. Didn't know the first thing about managing none of it. And because I didn't know what I was doing, I was stuck on stupid. I didn't know how to balance a checkbook. I found myself in prison, in jail, kicked out of school because I didn't know how to manage money. Couldn't tell my parents that for all these years. So embarrassed by it. But I learned. You talk to anybody that works with me now, I don't mess with my money. And you ain't gonna mess with my money. We don't have debt. We pay our bills on time. I run my company. We ain't no Negro business, whatever that means when people use that term pejoratively or punitively. We run a business, and we run it like a business. And I'm always on the road doing these free financial literacy seminars all across the country for years. I've been doing free financial literacy seminars. Why? Because I went to jail. Because I got kicked out of school. I understand what it means to get caught up in that. Too many of us spend money we don't have, buying stuff we don't need, trying to impress folk we don't even like. That's our problem. But I learned that lesson. I learned that the hard way. My parents didn't know that technically it took me 16 years to get my college degree. I've got 7 younger brothers and 2 sisters. I put most of them Negroes through college because they're younger than me. At places like Morehouse and Hampton. I'm on national TV, national radio, on the bestseller list with books. I've been in Marcus Books before I had my college degree. I'm on TV, radio, known around the country and in places, in parts of the world. But I'm the only one in the world that knows, other than my counselor at IU, that I hadn't technically finished my degree. Couldn't tell my parents I left a few credits short of getting my degree. Y'all watching me every night. And I'm still working at trying to get my degree. I finally got it done, but I couldn't tell my parents that I'd failed in that mission and I hadn't completed. But every day of my life, even after she was dead, I could hear Big Mama, my grandmother, in my ears saying to me, baby, once a task you have first begun, never finish until it's done. Be the labor great or small, do it well or not at all. I had to stick with that thing until I got that degree done. I talk in the book about how I got caught one day padding my time card. Too many people in the country today do exactly the same thing. You work in 3 hours, you're putting down 4. You work in 4 hours, you're putting down 6. And you don't think there's no harm in it until you get caught. Until you get caught. And then you got to deal with the consequences, what it means for your career when you get caught padding your time card. In many ways, I'm so glad I learned these lessons when I was young. When I was young, so that I could live a life atoning and redeeming myself for these mistakes I made when I was early on. But there are a lot of failings I've had in my professional career, a lot of mistakes I've made, and a lot of things that others perceived to be failures, but I understood better. Sometimes in life, a dead end is a finish line. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Whatever's happening to you, don't internalize that. Don't take it personally. We live in a world right now, in an economy right now, where the whole country is turned upside down economically. And I don't want anybody in this room or beyond to take your downsizing, you're being fired, you're being laid off, you're losing your job, you're losing your home. I don't want you to take none of that stuff personally. Sometimes the stuff that happens to you ain't got nothing to do with you. Sometimes. Now, you got to take responsibility for the things that you know you're in charge of. But there's so many Americans now who are suffering through no fault of their own. And if you let that failing take hold in you and depress you and make you despondent, then you can't wake up every day with the energy and the enthusiasm to take the risk to be creative, to keep failing your way up. Failure is not fatal. Failure is not final. Failure must never have the last word. And even when you can't be optimistic, you can be hopeful. Now, anybody black understands that distinction. Optimism suggests that there's a particular set of facts, circumstances, or conditions. Optimism says there's something you can see, feel, or touch that gives you reason to believe that things are going to get better. And so you say, I'm optimistic. But there's something you can see, feel, or touch that gives you reason to believe that. Hope, very, very different. That's why the Bible outreach says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things. That's what hope is. You can't even see it, but you hold on to hope anyway. I'm a witness, and I know somebody else in this room is tonight as well, that you can build a whole life on hope. Somebody say amen? You can build an entire life on hope. So as long as you are alive, whatever you're going through, as long as you hold on to hope. That's why the Negro National Anthem says that we had hope when hope unborn had already died. The next time you sing, lift every voice and sing, listen to that second verse and hit that, let that lyric get inside of you. That we had hope when hope unborn had already died. When hope got to black folk, it was stillborn. And we found a way to hold on to hope anyway. That's our experience. So failure must never have the last word. We never let failure defeat us, even when other people think that you have failed. A few years ago, when everybody in black America turned on me because of the Obama situation, all over the internet, all in the media, people called me everything but a child of God. He's a traitor. He's a hater. He's an Uncle Tom. Not in Oakland. He's a hater. He's a traitor. He's an Uncle Tom. I got called all kind of names. Why? Just because I'm holding Obama accountable. Yes. That's all we were talking about was accountability. I love the president. I want the president to be successful. But great presidents aren't born. Great presidents are made. You got to help push them into their greatness. There is no Abe Lincoln without Frederick Douglass pushing him. There is no FDR without A. Philip Randolph pushing him. There is no LBJ without MLK pushing him. If Obama is going to be a great president, not just a good one, if he's going to be transformative, not just a Clinton triangulator, if he's going to be a great president, not just another garden variety politician, if he's going to be great and progressive, we've got to push that Negro every step of the way into his greatness. And that's not hating. That's not hating on the president. I love the president, but I want him to be a great president. I want him to be transformative. This ain't about no symbolism. This is about substance. And I know that if he succeeds, there'll be another one like him. But if he fails, be another 400 years before we have an African-American president. That's why I want him to succeed. But sometimes when you tell them the truth, folk can't even see that. And they think you have failed. They laughing at you thinking you failed. They know your books ain't selling, your speech requests have gone down. Everybody thinks you persona non grata. Folk are laughing at you thinking Tavis has made the mistake of his life. This Negro miscalculated. He done ruined his career on the wrong side of the Obama question. And here's what I was saying. Everybody don't wake up at the same time. You don't wake up at the same time. That has nothing to do with you standing in your truth. Somebody's got to tell the truth. If you don't tell the truth, then the suffering gets rendered invisible. It's the telling of the truth that allows the suffering to speak. So sometimes when you on your journey, even your family and friends ain't gonna understand what you're doing. And they're gonna think you made a mistake. And they're gonna think you miscalculated. And they're gonna think you have failed. And they gonna hate them. Exactly. But at some time, at some point, even they will wake up and understand that all you were doing in love was standing in your truth. So you can't ever let your failings or the perception of your failings get in the way of you being true to your calling, to your vocation, and to your purpose. All I came to Oakland to say tonight is that I have failed up. Everybody I know who's successful has failed up. You gonna fail up. You gonna continue to fail up. And that's the way we gonna get there. Excuse me, that's how we gonna get there. So I'm hoping that this little book with the stories I lay out, when you read it, you'll find yourself in the narrative. Because all of us have to endure failure. And these things that we wrestle with about being, as a whole chapter, the first chapter, how I learned the hard way, what it means to be humble. How I learned that every day, that before honor comes humility. Before honor must first come humility. But these things we wrestle with every day. These personal failings we have in our own character, about being humble, about not lying, about not cheating, about being willing to tell the truth, about having courage and conviction and commitment, about working on your character every day. The same things I struggle with every day. But these are lessons that I learn anew all the time. I'm convinced that we can navigate through this period that we are in as a country. But we have to learn from our failings. We got to learn from our mistakes. I read a survey, I'm done here, read a survey a few weeks ago, a Rasmussen report, that finds that just over half of all Americans think that our best days as a nation are now behind us. That's scary. When you got folk in this room who believe that their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandkids aren't going to do as well as they have done, that's scary. That's scary. And our arrogance as a nation, our hubris as a nation, our ignorance as a nation, our lack of understanding history as a nation, our patriotism that is now morphed into nationalism doesn't even allow us to wrestle with the fact, the truth, that every nation, every empire in the history of the world has at some point failed. And say that again. You say that outside of Marcus' books, you get called anti-American. But inside of Marcus, I can tell the truth. That's why I love this space. Every empire in the history of the world has at some point faltered and or failed. And somehow our arrogance again won't even allow us to consider that America may very well be on the verge of failing, on the verge of faltering, on the verge of tripping over itself. To even suggest that as anti-American, not an accurate read of history, but anti-American. That's nonsense. That's where we are at this point in the country's history. I think this country is going to get crushed under the weight of its own poverty if we don't start to address the concerns of everyday people. We had better learn from the failures of other nations, of other empires, if we're going to avoid what may be on the horizon for us. You cannot advance a society into the future when 1% of the people control 90% of the wealth. That just doesn't work. Just doesn't work. So individually, familially, as a nation, we got to learn right now from our own mistakes, from the mistakes of others, and make sure that we do our part every day to fail our way up. And I thank you for listening. Church, say amen. Amen. Yes, sir.
I like the fact that you and Brother West have been critical in holding Obama accountable. Just months or so before the actual Democratic election of Obama, I was in Salvador Bahia and saw huge billboard signs of Obama in Salvador Bahia before he was nominated.
Right.
So there's a sense of who he is beyond being another succession of American presidents abroad, and especially to black people abroad.
Right.
What is your sense as a journalist, and internationally recognized journalist amongst other journalists? What is your sense of him as a figure,
right,
beyond being a president, beyond these nation state boundaries?
What I think of Obama and the figure that he represents, the image he represents around the world. I celebrate that. Short answer is I celebrate how he's viewed and regarded around the world. I will say, and I said this on my Twitter account, and Dr. West and I discussed on our radio show, I am concerned, was concerned, especially in Libya, and we're not really done with Libya yet. It does trouble me that this president has gotten himself, or continued to involve himself, in 3 wars in 3 Muslim countries at the same time. That's a scary thing for a guy who went to that part of the world to say there's a new way of doing business in America. It's a new day, there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak. I'm concerned about what that kind of military action does for him in that part of the world. I'm also concerned that just beyond the Muslim world, that we can't bomb our way into peace. Yeah. And I have a hard time every day trying to juxtapose a war president with a Nobel Peace Prize. Right. A war president with a Peace Prize, that's tough for me. I said the other day that the bust of Dr. King, the bust of King that Obama put in the Oval Office must surely be whispering to him every day. This bust must surely be whispering to him every day that war is the enemy of the poor. Those are King's words, that war is the enemy of the poor. So again, I celebrate him in this country. Let me be very clear about this. I understand all that he has against him. All that's on his plate, the right-wing, vicious, vulgar attack against him, I understand that, and I'm sympathetic to that every day. The threats on his life, I pray for this brother every single day. But that does not absolve us of our responsibility to speak truth to power and lovingly help push him into his greatness by holding him accountable. That's all I'm saying, and I thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Joshua Johnson. We met at...
Oh, I met today. Sure did. Thank you, brother. Yeah.
Today. First of all, I'm glad to be one of the other black men in public broadcasting. So
I'm glad to have you, yeah.
There's a few of us. There ain't a lot of us, but there's a few of us.
This brother does news on KGO.
KQED.
KQED, I'm sorry, KQED, thank you.
Yeah, in the morning newscast.
Morning newscast, yes, sir.
My question is, every year I've watched you do the State of the Black Union on C-SPAN. What would you say is the state of Black California?
Troubled, tenuous at best. I'm always troubled by the fact, short answer here, that for a state that is as diverse as California is, that we have so little representation comparatively inside of Black America, inside of Black California rather, that for all that we represent in this state, our representation at the political level is not as significant as it ought to be. When I go every now and then, when I get a chance to, or invited to say something, when I go to the State House, to the Assembly, when I go to the California Senate, I'm always troubled by the dearth, the paucity of African American elected officials in those bodies. So that for all that we represent in the state of California, our power is so little. I worked for Tom Bradley for years when he was mayor of Los Angeles. But ain't nobody black running nothing in Los Angeles these days. You know what I'm saying? You still got, some vestige of power here in the city of Oakland. But all across this state, I shudder to think of all that we have done for this state, all that we offer to this state, all that we represent in this state economically. And I'm troubled by the fact that our representation at the political level doesn't seem to equate to our numbers in the state. And I'm not casting aspersion on our Hispanic brothers and sisters. I'm just being real about this. Their growing presence in the state means a diminishment of that particular power. I'm all for building coalitions. I'm just answering your question expressly, that our political clout in this state is waning. It's waning, and that troubles me. Yes, ma'am. I'll come to that side, I promise.
I'm born and raised here in Oakland, a mother of 3 daughters. I'm trying diligently to bring them up the right way, get them educated. I'm asking you, what advice do you share that I can impart with my friends when I leave here today about what we can do to the betterment of our children here in this city?
Specifically on the issue of education.
And I brought my daughter here tonight to meet you and hear you speak.
Is your daughter here?
That's my daughter, Camille Baptiste, right there.
In just a few minutes. Thank you. Glad you came. Okay. Specifically on the issue of education. Malcolm X put it this way, and Malcolm was right. Education is our passport to the future. Yes. Tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Here's the bottom line. I've learned in my travels across this country, without regard, we could debate education all night, and I got a lot to say about it, but in the time I have, without regard to whether the school is public or private, rich or not so rich, urban or suburban. The one thing that I'm confident of, and I'm certain of, the one thing I know for sure, is that the schools that do best in this country are the schools where parents are involved. Exactly. That's the bottom line. And at some point, for all that we are up against, if we truly believe that there is nothing more important than the education of our children, then we have to act that way. We have to behave that way. Exactly. And if it means marching, if it means protesting, if it means cussing folk out, in Jesus' name, of course. If it means going to PTA meetings, if it means going to school board meetings, if it means running for office ourselves, I'm just giving you a range of options. I don't care what the option is. I said today in an interview, we talked about the fact, this notion that failure is not an option. People don't say failure is not an option. Yes, it is. And a whole lot of folk are choosing it every single day. We can't say that education is that important to us and then allow failure to be an option. Parents have to get involved. You know, anything that you care about that deeply, you will do anything. You will do, and you're going to have to do anything. And you're just one parent. But I've also discovered in my years of traveling and my work that courage is contagious. Yes, it is. Courage is contagious. And when people see your courage, they glom onto that. Courage is contagious. It starts with one or two or three people. But the bottom line is, it cannot be. Failure in this instance cannot be an option for our children. So that anything and everything that must be done for you to get your kids educated, you don't let nothing get in the way of that. There is nothing more important to you than you seeing your kids get an education, because you understand what rests on that. If every parent had that attitude, that nothing will get in the way of me ensuring and demanding that my children have access to an equal high quality education, if that becomes your modus operandi and that's all you live for, it's the education of your children, making sure that they get a chance in this world. If you are that dogged, determined about it, it'll happen for you and every parent who feels that way. And I thank you. Absolutely. I laugh all the time in the midst of doing this book tour. I got asked by Wendy Williams, not asked, but begged by Wendy to come on her show. And I thought about it, and I always laugh when people see me in settings other than public television and public radio, because people think I'm such a conservative guy and stand-up guy, and I don't get my groove on or get my party on, And I laugh at that because I am on PBS every night. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna be breakdancing on PBS every night. But when I'm out of that studio, I love having a good time. And the older I get, the more I realize that life really is very fleeting. And you got to have some fun along the way, and everything can't all be work without any play. And so when people don't see me in the studio, I'm acting a fool. I really am more ignorant than I am intelligent, y'all. Y'all just don't know that. And so that when Boots and I get together, or when Prince and I get together, I was just with Prince the other night on stage with him in LA, acting like a fool. I'm surprised they ain't made the YouTube yet. When I'm with Prince, or I'm with Bootsy or James Brown when he lived, I have very eclectic music taste. I love music, all kinds of music. And when I'm not in the studio, typically I'm going to see somebody in concert. Bootsy, that Negro is funky. And if you haven't got his new CD, he has a new CD out. Everybody in the world is on this CD. And people love and respect him so much. Everybody collaborated with him. It's one of the best CDs I've heard in a long time. And not because he's my friend, but he has a track on the CD with Dr. West. It's called Freedom, but it's spelled Freedumb. Freedom. Right. And you can imagine where West goes with this. We've been given freedom, the free to be dumb. It's a cold piece. That ain't mine. That's West and Bootsy. But when you hear what West is rapping at, as it were, on this song, and the bass line that Bootsy puts to it, oh, it's so funky. But I had a great time, Bootsy. I had a great time. Yes, ma'am. What advice for youth who want to have a career like mine? Be careful what you ask for. You might just get it. I'm honored when young people. I spoke last night. Got in here town late last night and went to spend some time with some students at Cal State East Bay last night. Went over there, spent some time with the students, and we had some conversation about this last night. I'm always honored when people see anything in my career they want to emulate. But this really is a tough road to hoe. If you want to own what you do and control what you do and not work for everybody else, getting to that place takes a lot of work. I couldn't have written this book It's 20 years I've been doing this. I couldn't have written this book 15, 10, 5 years ago. It took a while to get to a place to be able to write this book. So there's a long struggle and long journey, which I lay out in the book. But ultimately, I tell people 3 things. 1, whatever you do in life, especially if it's going to be this, you got to be passionate about what you do, number 1. Number 2, commit yourself now to being a truth teller. What every one of us ultimately comes to understand, even though you may not have thought about it this way, but as professionals, no matter what field we're in, media or otherwise, what we ultimately come to understand is that life is really about 2 choices. Every day, those of us who are adults in professional settings, every day, as parents even, you find yourself making a choice between 1 of 2 things. Life is ultimately about whether or not you're going to be a truth teller or a power grabber. Are you going to tell the truth or are you going to grab the power? And by power, I mean access, opportunity, the hookup. But that's what it really boils down to. Every decision really boils down to, are you going to tell the truth or are you going to grab the power? Are you going to side with the weak or are you going to side with the strong? It's really where your values lie in the world that you find yourself wrestling with every single day. So if you're going to be in this business, because there's so many folk lying every day in this business, commit yourself to being a truth teller. And thirdly, and just as importantly, if you're going to be in this business, learn how to be a generous listener. The folk who make the best talk show host are the folk who listen generously. They listen lovingly. They listen well. If you come in with your agenda for every conversation, you think you leading the conversation, it's not quite as good. There's a difference between an interview and a conversation. What I try to conduct every night, every day, are conversations, starting with learning how to be a generous listener. The more generously you listen, the better you'll be in this business.
I've noticed that the level of racism and the level of institutional racism and racism in the discourse that is happening in the media and in the world seems to be on the rise, and no one is addressing it. And someone who's in the public, what do we need to do maybe, or what needs to happen to address? I mean, for Haley Barbour to say that segregation was all right, and the way that very secretly this racism is coming up, you know what I'm talking about. How do we address it? What would some of the suggestions that you have that we need to answer this?
Powerful question. The short answer is that more of us, I sound repetitive, more of us have to commit ourselves to telling the truth, no matter what the consequences are. In every venue we have available to us, as op-ed writers for newspapers, calling into talk shows that you listen to. I always love when Negroes listen to radio and cuss at the radio. Like the folk inside can hear you. If you listen every day and you hear that nonsense, pick up the phone, call into the radio show, and give them an alternative point of view. You can't cuss at the box, cuss at the television. Go online, write an email. Everybody's got access to computer now. When you're watching these shows, go on television and say, CNN, shame on you for whatever you did. Fox News, shame on you for what you did. You got to use every vehicle, every tool available to you to express yourself. I was on NBC in the midst of this tour the week that Donald Trump just lost his last mind and went after Obama with the birth certificate stuff. And some of you may remember this or may have heard about it. I said on NBC, which I had to get my security increased because death threats started coming in. All I said was on NBC that this race for the White House is going to be the most expensive. We already know that. But the most divisive, the nastiest, the ugliest, and the most racist campaign in the history of this republic. I said that on NBC and all hell broke loose. Tavis Smiley's playing the race card. And Tavis Smiley's trying to reframe the debate. Well, and the truth of the matter is that the evidence abounds. You know, somebody said, somebody went off on me on Fox News. Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly discussed this for 3 nights, and Limbaugh jumped on, and it's like they had a meeting together, and their angle was the same. That Tavis Smiley is saying this because he wants it to be. If he keeps saying this, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. To which I responded, a self-fulfilling prophecy speaks to what might happen in the future. What I'm talking about is happening in the present. So it's not about me trying to change the game here. I'm trying to bring attention to the obvious. The bottom line is that those of us who have voices, which is every one of us, have got to use every vehicle, every tool available to us to express our outrage about this mess when we see it. Because I meant what I said. This race is going to be nasty. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be racist. It's going to be divisive. And for those, that's again. So my point is, Donald Trump started this mess. He ain't even in the race yet. He's talking trash and ain't even declared he's running. And yesterday or today, Newt Gingrich is in the race now. I like Newt. He's a decent guy on a personal level, but you know the kind of rhetoric he's capable of. This is going to be nasty. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be racist. And for those of us, I don't care, for those of us of conscience, no matter what color we are, for those of us of conscience, we're going to have to be on our P's and Q's this time around. The first time around with Obama, they didn't want to say a whole lot. They didn't want to say a whole lot. You know, didn't think he might win, wasn't sure if he's going to pull it off. And they saw the tide was building up behind him so powerfully, they said, okay, we're going to let this go. Now that he's been in for a couple of years, They coming with everything they have this time. And for those of us who are, again, people of conscience, we're going to have to be on top of our game this time to stamp that nonsense out every time we hear it or see it. Because if we ever let that stuff start, it's going to be a slippery, nasty slope. I love you all. Let's sign some books. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate it.